They called her a shoplifter. They said it loud enough for the whole store to hear. And when she asked for proof, the manager laughed. He didn't know who he was laughing at. It was a Tuesday in early November, the kind of cold that settles into your bones before you realize it's arrived. The Harrington's department store on Michigan Avenue in Chicago had just finished its grand reopening, a spectacle of polished marble floors and crystal chandeliers, and the kind of curated luxury that made ordinary people feel like they were guests in someone else's house. The holiday displays were already up, gold and ivory, tasteful and aspirational. The kind of stall where the salespeople wore earpieces and watched the door. Loretta Beaumont-Hawes didn't look like she belonged there. That was the problem. Or rather, that was the lie. She was 51 years old, compact and precise in the way that 28 years of military service makes a person compact and precise. She wore a camel wool coat she'd bought in Brussels during a NATO summit 3 years ago. Dark slacks and low heels. No jewelry except for a thin gold watch on her left wrist and a single pearl on each ear. Her hair was natural, cut close and silver at the temples. She carried a structured leather tote that she'd owned for 15 years because she didn't see the point in replacing things that still worked. She was retired, 6 months out of uniform. Colonel Loretta Beaumont-Hawes, United States Army, formerly of the 1st Infantry Division, formerly the senior logistics advisor to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. She had managed the supply chain for forward operating bases across 3 continents. She had briefed 4-star generals and testified before the Senate Armed Services Committee. She had shaken the hand of 2 presidents. She was in Harrington's to buy a birthday gift for a daughter. The perfume counter was near the rear of the ground floor, past the handbags and the silk scarves, and the kind of shoes that cost more than a month's rent in most American cities. Beaumont-Hawes moved through the floor with the unhurried confidence of a woman who knew exactly where she was going. She paused at a display of hand creams, picked one up, read the ingredients, set it back down. She examined a wallet briefly before moving on. She stopped at the perfume counter and asked the young attendant, a woman with a name tag that read Brianna, about a specific fragrance her daughter had mentioned at Thanksgiving. Brianna was helpful. She pulled 3 bottles, explained the notes, offered sample strips. Beaumont-Hawes tested 2, asked a question about longevity, and settled on a tall amber bottle priced at $240. She handed over her card. That was when the man appeared. His name was Todd Hargrove. He was the floor manager, mid-40s, with the particular type of confidence that comes not from accomplishment, but from authority over a small and specific domain. He wore a black blazer with a Harrington's pin on the lapel. He came around the side of the perfume counter with the slow, deliberate walk of a man who wants you to notice he's coming. "Ma'am," he said, not politely, "I'm going to need you to come with me." Beaumont-Hawes looked at him. "I beg your pardon?" "We have you on camera," Hargrove said, his voice pitched loud enough for the couple nearby to turn their heads, loud enough for a woman testing lipstick 2 displays over to pause and look. Pocketing merchandise near the scarf display. "I'm going to need you to accompany me to the back office." Brianna behind the counter had gone rigid, her eyes darting between Hargrove and the woman she'd just been helping for the past 8 minutes. Beaumont-Hawes did not move. She looked at Hargrove with the particular stillness of someone who has stood on airstrips at 3 in the morning receiving bad news and learned to process it before reacting. "I didn't take anything," she said. "The camera disagrees." "Then show me the footage. We'll review it in the back." "We'll review it here," she said. Her voice hadn't risen. It hadn't needed to. Hargrove smiled. It was the smile of a man who believed he had already won. "Ma'am, I can do this the easy way or the hard way. If you don't come willingly, I'll have to call security and we'll do this in front of everyone." "Then call security," Beaumont-Hawes said, "because I'm not taking a single step until you show me what you claim I did." The couple nearby had stopped pretending to browse. A teenage girl near the escalator had her phone out. The woman with the lipstick had set it down entirely. Hargrove made a show of speaking into his earpiece. Within 90 seconds, 2 security guards arrived. Both were young, one barely out of his teens. They positioned themselves on either side of Beaumont-Hawes with the stiff posture of people who wanted to look more formidable than they felt. "She's refusing to cooperate," Hargrove told them. "I'm refusing to be falsely accused," Beaumont-Hawes said, directly to the guards, not to Hargrove. She set her tote on the counter slowly. "You're welcome to search this bag. You're welcome to search my coat. You are welcome to search my person if you have a licensed female security officer present. You will not find anything because I didn't take anything." She looked at Hargrove. "But what I would like, before any of that happens, is for you to show me this footage, because if you can't, then this conversation has a very different ending than the one you're imagining." Hargrove smiled and waver. He was used to this part. The denial, the indignation. He'd been floor manager at Harrington's for 11 years. He had a theory about people. A theory he'd never said out loud but operated by every day. A theory about who belonged in a store like this and who was there to take what they hadn't earned. His theory was tidy and it was wrong, but it had served him well enough that he'd never had cause to question it. Until now. "Search the bag," he said to the guards. The younger guard reached for it. Beaumont-Hawes put her hand on top of it. "I said I'd allow the search," she told him. "I did not say you'd be doing it without documentation. What is your name?" She looked at the guard. "And yours?" She looked at the other. "And yours?" Back to Hargrove. "This isn't a deposition," Hargrove said. "It might become one," she replied. Her hand went to her coat pocket. She withdrew her phone without haste and opened the camera. She turned it slowly around the immediate area, capturing the ceiling cameras, the counter, the guards, Hargrove's face. He moved to block her. "You can't film in this store. There's no posted signage prohibiting it in this section," she said. "And I am documenting a potential civil rights violation. You're welcome to call your legal department and confirm whether you'd like to stop me." It was the word legal that shifted something behind Hargrove's eyes. A small flinch. 11 years of confrontations, and he'd learned to read the room. Most people at this point either started crying or started shouting. This woman was doing neither. She was doing something much more unsettling. She was being methodical. "Let's just all calm down," one of the guards said. "I'm perfectly calm," Beaumont-Hawes said. "I've been calm since this began." It was at that moment that the elevator doors opened. The woman who stepped out was in her late 20s and moved the way some people move through airports, with the unconscious ease of someone who has done this 1,000 times and is already thinking about the next place they need to be. She wore a dark blazer over a cream blouse, her hair pulled back, a messenger bag slung across her shoulder. She was looking at her phone as she stepped off the elevator, already scanning the room the way people do when they're looking for someone specific. She found her someone. Mom. She covered the distance between the elevator and the perfume counter in about 15 seconds. "What's happening?" "Your timing," Beaumont-Hawes said, with something that might have been the beginning of a dry smile, "has always been impeccable." The young woman, her name was Simone Beaumont-Hawes, and she was an attorney, a fact that would become relevant very shortly, looked from her mother to Hargrove, to the two guards and back to Hargrove. "What's happening?" she repeated. And this time it wasn't a question for her mother. Hargrove straightened. This woman has been accused of shoplifting. We're in the process of." "Accused by whom?" "By our loss prevention system. We have her on camera." "Show me." "We do this in the back office." "Show me the footage right now," Simone said, "or stop talking about it. Because you've accused my mother of theft in front of witnesses, in public, loudly enough that I could hear the word shoplifter from the elevator, and if you cannot immediately produce evidence that supports that accusation, we have a problem." She set her bag on the counter beside her mother's tote. "My name is Simone Beaumont-Hawes. I'm a civil litigation attorney. Would you like me to call my office and have someone here in 20 minutes, or would you like to show us this footage right now?" Hargrove's face had changed. Not dramatically. A slight tightening around the eyes. "A recalibration." "There's no need to escalate this," he said. "You escalated it when you announced to the floor that my mother was a thief." Simone's voice was even, but there was a steel filament running through it. "Now, the footage." Hargrove spoke into his earpiece. There was a long pause. Then the voice on the other end of the earpiece said something, and whatever it was, it made Hargrove's jaw tighten. He spoke again, quieter. Another pause. The teenage girl near the escalator still had her phone out. She wasn't even pretending anymore. There may have been, Hargrove said slowly, a misidentification. The words fell into the silence of the department store floor like stones into still water. Beaumont-Hawes looked at him. Say that again, please. The camera. We may have been tracking the wrong individual. There was a woman earlier in similar. Similar what? Simone asked. Hargrove didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Everyone present understood what he meant by similar. Similar coat. Similar build. Similar skin. I want the name of your district manager, Simone said. I want the name of your corporate legal department. And I want the name of every individual who participated in this detention. Because that's what this was. A detention. An unlawful one. I want it all in writing before we leave this floor. One of the security guards, the older one, who had said nothing since arriving, quietly stepped back from Beaumont-Hawes' side. The younger one looked like he wanted to disappear into the marble floor. Hargrove tried once more. Look, it was an honest mistake. We can offer a store credit, something for the inconvenience. A store credit, Beaumont-Hawes said. She picked up her leather tote from the counter. She picked up the amber perfume bottle beside it. She looked at it for a moment. Then she set it back down. I no longer wish to make a purchase today, she said. Then she turned to Brianna, who was still standing behind the counter, pale and miserable, clearly wanting no part of any of this. Thank you for your help, Beaumont-Hawes said to her. Her voice was the same as it had been when she first asked about the fragrance. Unhurried. Precise. You were very kind. Brianna looked like she might cry. Beaumont-Hawes and Simone walked toward the exit. Hargrove stood at the perfume counter and watched them go, his Harrington's lapel pin catching the light of the chandeliers. The teenager near the escalator lowered her phone. She'd gotten everything she needed. The video was 22 seconds long. Simone had posted it 30 minutes after they left the store, after confirming with her mother that it was all right to do so. She'd captioned it simply, "My mother is a retired Army colonel. She was accused of shoplifting today at Harrington, Chicago because she was shopping while black. She didn't take anything. They admitted it. Here is what accountability looks like." Nas, Harrington stepped. By midnight, it had 400,000 views. By the next morning, it had 3.2 million. By the time the Harrington's corporate communications team arrived at their offices on Wednesday, there were news trucks on Michigan Avenue. The comment section was a referendum, not just on Harrington's, on every luxury store that had ever watched the wrong customer a little too closely, on every manager who had ever made a calculation about who deserved to be treated with dignity before they'd said a single word. The hashtag moved fast. Former customers posted their own stories. A woman in Atlanta recalled being followed through a Harrington's in Buckhead for 40 minutes without buying anything. A man in Houston described being asked 3 times to produce a receipt for a watch he was wearing on his wrist. A watch he'd bought at that same store 4 hours earlier. It wasn't one incident. It never was. Hargrove found out he was being placed on administrative leave from a text message. He'd been in his car in the parking garage under the store, sitting with the engine off, trying to understand how a Tuesday had become this. 11 years. He'd been there for 11 years. He'd been there for 11 years. He'd won the district's annual loss prevention award twice. He had a daughter in middle school and a mortgage in Naperville and a brother-in-law who was a cop who always said, "Trust your instincts, Todd. Your instincts are what keep you safe." He sat in the garage for a long time. The corporate response came Thursday morning. It was a statement issued through Harrington's PR firm, and it used words like regret and does not reflect our values and commitment to an inclusive environment, and it announced that Todd Hargrove had been suspended pending a full internal review. It also announced the Harringtons would be partnering with a civil rights organization to conduct mandatory bias training for all customer-facing staff. It did not mention Loretta Beaumont-Hawes by name. Simone's response to the statement, posted 40 minutes after it went live, was 3 sentences long. "We appreciate Harrington's acknowledgement that what happened to my mother was wrong. We will be reviewing all available legal options, and to everyone who shared their own experiences this week, we see you." The call came Friday afternoon. Beaumont-Hawes was at her kitchen table when her phone rang. The number was a Chicago area code she didn't recognize. She answered it. The man on the other end introduced himself as the Senior Vice President of Customer Relations at Harrington's parent company. His voice had the particular quality of a man who had spent the last 72 hours in rooms full of lawyers. "Colonel Beaumont-Hawes," he said, "I want to begin by offering you our most sincere and personal apology." "I appreciate that," she said. "I'd like to tell you something first, if that's all right." A brief pause. "Of course. I spent 28 years in the army," she said. "I managed logistics operations in environments where the cost of getting things wrong wasn't money, it was lives. I learned very early that the difference between an organization that corrects course and an organization that collapses is whether the people at the top are willing to look directly at the failure without managing the narrative around it." She paused. "I'm not interested in a settlement that makes this go away quietly. I'm interested in whether Harrington's is capable of understanding what actually happened in that store. Not just to me. To the pattern of behavior your training systems and your hiring culture have produced. If that's a conversation you're ready to have, then I'm listening. If this call is about containing a PR problem, I'd rather we both save the time." There was a silence on the line. "Colonel," the man said, and his voice had shifted, "I think we're ready to have that conversation." What followed was not what anyone in the Harrington's legal department had anticipated. Beaumont-Hawes came to the table, not with a list of demands for personal compensation, but with a document. She'd spent Thursday night writing it. It was 12 pages long and it detailed, with the precision of someone who had written operational briefings for senior military leadership, a proposed framework for what genuine accountability could look like, an independent audit of Harrington's loss prevention records for the past 5 years, cross-reference with the demographics of who had been detained and under what justification, a third-party review of hiring and promotion patterns in floor management, a transparent public report of findings, restitution to identified individuals who had been wrongfully detained based on racial profiling, not just herself, and the establishment of a community advisory board with actual power, not a decorative panel, to review policy changes and ensure implementation. She'd served 28 years learning to build systems that could outlast the people who built them. She applied the same thinking here. Simone sat beside her at every meeting. She was very good at her job. The internal review, when it was completed and released 5 weeks later as part of the agreement, contained information that confirmed what Beaumont-Hawes had suspected but needed to see in writing. In the previous 4 years, 73% of loss prevention stops at the Chicago-Michigan Avenue location had involved Black or Latino customers. Of those stops, 61% had resulted in no merchandise being recovered. Todd Hargrove's stops alone had an 84% error rate. Hargrove did not return to Harrington's. The terms of his departure were not public. The judge in Naperville, who saw him at school pick up the following month, said he looked 20 years older. On a Saturday in late January, Beaumont-Hawes went back to Michigan Avenue. She didn't go back to Harrington's. She walked past it, her camel coat buttoned against the lake wind, and she paused for a moment on the sidewalk in front of the polished revolving door. The Christmas displays were down, the windows were clean, a young woman in a Harrington's uniform was adjusting a scarf on a mannequin behind the glass, and she looked up briefly, and for a second they made eye contact through the cold, transparent barrier between them. Then the young woman looked back at the mannequin. Beaumont-Hawes walked on. She had a meeting that morning with the director of the Community Advisory Board, a woman named Dr. Constance Webb, who ran the Urban Justice Initiative out of an office above a bakery on South Michigan. They were reviewing the first draft of the audit findings together. There was coffee. There were pastries that Dr. Webb had brought from downstairs. There was work to do. The last time someone underestimated Loretta Beaumont-Hawes, she was 19 years old, and an army recruiter had told her she might find the physical requirements challenging. She'd smiled at him, then the same way she'd smiled at no one in particular on the sidewalk in front of Harrington's. It was the smile of a woman who understood that the people who misread her were not her problem, that was simply her proof. There was a specific kind of arrogance that comes from never being questioned. It grows in the quiet. It assumes its own rightness. It looks at a 51-year-old woman in a camel coat and sees a target, not a colonel. It announces itself loudly across a department store floor and waits for the world to confirm its assumptions. Sometimes the world does, and that is a tragedy. But sometimes a retired colonel sits a tote on the counter, opens her phone, and looks the assumption directly in the face. And sometimes her daughter walks off an elevator at exactly the right moment. And sometimes a teenager near the escalator has a phone out. And sometimes the footage doesn't exist because the crime didn't happen. And then the whole architecture of that arrogance, the lapel pin, the earpiece, the 11 years, the theory about who belongs, comes apart quietly on a Tuesday afternoon under the light of very expensive chandeliers. Todd Hargrove thought he was protecting the store. He was actually ending his career. Loretta Beaumont-Hawes didn't come to Harrington's looking for a fight. She came to buy perfume for her daughter. But she'd spent 28 years learning that when someone brings a fight to you, you don't run from it. You assess it, you adapt, and then you dismantle it so completely that the next person who comes through that door is a little safer than she was. That's what a colonel does. If this story moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to see it. Drop in the comments, what would you have done in that store? And if you have your own story, your own moment when someone looked at you and got it completely wrong, tell us. We're listening. Subscribe to Echoes of Justice and ring the bell. Because there are more stories to tell, and every one of them matters. I keep thinking about the moment Loretta set that perfume bottle back down on the counter. She didn't slam it. She didn't say anything dramatic. She just set it down, picked up her bag, and turned to say thank you to the young woman who had been kind to her. That was it. And somehow that quiet was louder than anything else that happened in that store. I've been sitting with this story for a while now. And what stays with me isn't the video going viral, or the internal audit, or the numbers, 73%, 84% error rate, as staggering as those numbers are. What stays with me is that Loretta already knew what kind of moment she was in before anyone else in that store did. She knew it the second Hargrove appeared. And instead of shrinking from it or exploding into it, she did something much harder. She stayed exactly who she was. That's the thing about character. It doesn't announce itself. It just holds when everything around it is trying to make it bend. Loretta spent 28 years building systems that had to work under pressure, in the dark, far from anyone who could come and fix them. You don't do that without developing a certain kind of clarity about what actually matters. She didn't reach for her phone because she wanted to go viral. She reached for it because she understood, with the precision of someone who has spent decades thinking about documentation and accountability, that the truth needed a witness. That was the intelligence of it. Not performance, not revenge, just the disciplined recognition that if you want things to change, you have to be willing to do the unglamorous work of making the record. And then Simone walked off that elevator. I think about what it means that Loretta raised a daughter who walked into that situation without flinching. Who set her bag on the counter and said, "Show me the footage right now," and meant it. That didn't happen by accident. That was a mother teaching a daughter, through decades of ordinary life, what it looks like to stand in your own truth and not apologize for taking up space. There's a kind of courage that most people never get tested on. Not the dramatic kind, not running into burning buildings, but the sustained, unglamorous kind. The courage to stay calm when someone is loudly and publicly wrong about you. The courage to be precise when every instinct is screaming at you to just leave. Just let it go. It isn't worth it. Loretta had that courage. She'd been building it her whole life, one decision at a time, long before that Tuesday in November. And Todd Hargrove had 11 years of being certain he was right. 11 years of a theory about who belonged and who didn't, unchallenged, growing comfortable in the silence of no consequences. That's how these things calcify, not with malice in every moment, but with the slow accumulation of never being asked to look directly at what you're actually doing. The audit didn't just expose one bad stop, it exposed what happens when a wrong assumption is never questioned. 73% of stops, 61% finding nothing. That's not instinct. That's a pattern, and patterns don't end themselves. What changed them was one woman who refused to walk to the back office, who said, "Show me, right here, right now." And then did the methodical, unglamorous, 12-page work of making sure the change would outlast the moment. I don't think justice is something that just arrives. I think it's something people build, carefully, with everything they know, on the days when it would be easier to let it go. Loretta didn't let it go. And that's why we're still talking about it.